Japanese Billionaire was ignored by everyone, until the black waitress spoke fluent Japanese. The crystal chandeliers of Lucille, Manhattan's most exclusive rooftop restaurant, flickered like cold stars above Hiroshi Tanaka's bowed head. At 9:17 p.m. on a biting November evening, the billionaire sat alone at the corner table reserved for royalty and presidents, his charcoal Tom Ford suit pressed to surgical perfection, his Patek Philippe glinting beneath the cuff. Yet the maitre d' had not greeted him. The sommelier had not approached. 3 separate parties of hedge fund princes and influencer heiresses had been seated ahead of him, their laughter slicing through the hush like thrown diamonds. Hiroshi's reservation, made under his assistant's name to avoid fuss, had somehow vanished from the system. He waited. He was, after all, accustomed to waiting. He had built a $42 billion empire on the art of patience. Across the marble floor, Aisha Washington balanced a silver tray of foie gras blinis on one palm, her locks twisted into a low knot that defied the restaurant's sleek updo dress code. She was 29, a Howard University linguistics dropout who paid rent by memorizing specials in 4 languages and smiling through microaggressions in a 5th. Tonight her section was the Siberia of Lucille, the back bar near the service elevator, where the air smelled of bleach and the guests tipped in loose change. She watched the lone Japanese man at table 12. His shoulders were square, but his eyes, ancient, tired, scanned the room like a lighthouse keeper searching for ships that never came. Aisha had seen ignored men before. Drunk finance bros who pinched. Tech founders who spoke to her chest. But this man was different. He did not scowl or wave his phone. He simply existed, a quiet void the room refused to fill. When the hostess finally breezed past him with a brittle apology, "We're overbooked, sir, perhaps the bar," Aisha felt something snap inside her apron pocket, the same place she kept her mother's old prayer card. She crossed the floor. "Sumimasen," she said, the syllables soft as silk. "Tanaka-sama desu ka." Hiroshi's head lifted. The room's noise dimmed, as though someone had cupped a hand over the world's mouth. He stared at the waitress, tall, dark-skinned, her name tag reading A. Washington in block letters, and answered in the Kansai dialect of his childhood, the one he hadn't heard outside Osaka in 30 years. "Hi, Soshite Anata wa, dare desu ka." "Yes. And you are, who?" Aisha smiled, switching seamlessly. "Watashi wa Aisha, kyo wa osewa ni narimasu. Menu o go ane shimasho ka." "I am Aisha, I'll be taking care of you tonight. Shall I walk you through the menu?" The maitre d' froze mid-stride, a champagne flute trembling in his grip. 2 tables over, a TikTok starlet's jaw unhinged, her phone camera, angled for a selfie, now captured Hiroshi Tanaka's stunned face instead of her collagen pout. Whispers ricocheted. Aisha did not wait for permission. She pulled out the chair opposite Hiroshi, sat, and began translating the chef's omakase with the precision of a Tokyo concierge. She pronounced uni, like a native of Hokkaido, rolled the r in wagyu, like a Kyoto geisha, and when she described the yuzu kosho as a citrus firework on the tongue, Hiroshi laughed. An actual, unguarded laugh that cracked open 30 years of boardroom stoicism. The restaurant's orbit shifted. The sommelier materialized. The chef emerged from the kitchen, toque in hand. Phones rose like periscopes, but Hiroshi waved them all away with a flick of 2 fingers, the same gesture he used to dismiss hostile takeovers. He wanted only Aisha. "Tell me," he said in Japanese, leaning forward, "how does a waitress in New York speak like my grandmother from Nara?" Aisha's smile faltered, just for a breath. "Anime," she admitted. "Started with Spirited Away at 12. Then Duolingo. Then a semester abroad in Kyoto on a scholarship I couldn't afford, so I washed dishes at a ramen shop in Gion. The obachan there taught me more than any textbook." She shrugged. "Languages are doors. Some of us just keep knocking." Hiroshi studied her. In his world, doors were bought, not knocked on. He thought of his daughter, Emmy, 27 and fluent in venture capital jargon but unable to order tea in the countryside of her ancestors. He thought of the 3 a.m. conference calls where English was a weapon and silence was surrender. He thought of the last time anyone had spoken to him without wanting something. He stood. The room inhaled. "Would you," he began, then switched to English, loud enough for the hedge fund princes to hear, "join me for dinner?" As my guest, not my server. Gasps. A champagne cork popped somewhere, premature. Aisha glanced at her manager, a man whose forehead glistened like prosciutto fat. He nodded so hard his bow tie spun. She untied her apron, folded it with the reverence of a flag, and sat across from the billionaire as an equal. What followed was not a meal but a confession. Over sashimi flown in from Tsukiji that morning, Hiroshi spoke of his childhood in a two-room Osaka apartment where his mother counted yen for rice. Aisha countered with stories of her father, a jazz trumpeter who died mid-solo in a Harlem club, leaving her a vinyl of Miles Davis and a debt she still paid in shifts. Between the miso cod and the matcha soufflé, they discovered shared wounds, the loneliness of being the only one in the room who looked different, the way ambition could calcify into isolation. At 11:42 p.m., the chef presented a dessert that did not exist on the menu, a single dorayaki pancake split open, revealing red bean paste shaped like a heart. Hiroshi's eyes glistened. It was his mother's recipe, the one she made on his birthday until the cancer took her at 53. He had not tasted it in 20 years. How? He whispered. Aisha's voice was steady. I called in a favor from a friend at a bakery in Little Tokyo. Told them it was for someone who needed to remember he was loved. Hiroshi's hand trembled as he lifted the pancake. Crumbs fell like snow. He ate in silence, and when he finished, he did not reach for a napkin. He reached for Aisha's hand instead. The room watched, breathless. I have spent my life, he said, voice raw, buying silence. Tonight you gave me noise, real noise. Laughter, memory, humanity. He pulled a card from his wallet, matte black, no logo. This is not payment. This is a door. My foundation funds education for first-generation students. Your tuition, your mother's medical bills, your brother's juvenile record, gone. But more than that, he pressed the card into her palm. Come work for me, not as a translator, as a bridge. The world is full of people speaking past each other. I want you to teach them how to listen. Aisha stared at the card. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She thought of the 4 a.m. shifts, the cracked linoleum of her bed-stuy apartment, the way her mother's hands shook now when she tried to braid Aisha's hair. She thought of the ramen shop obachan who had called her, Masumi, daughter, and slipped extra chashu into her bowl when rent was late. She closed her fingers around the card. I accept, she said. But on one condition. Hiroshi raised an eyebrow. Tonight, you leave the biggest tip this place has ever seen. Not for me, for every server who's ever been invisible. He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes for the first time in decades. Done. At 12:03 a.m., the bill arrived, $4,782. Hiroshi signed with a fountain pen older than Aisha. Beneath the total, he wrote a tip, $100,000. He circled the server line and wrote A. Washington in careful kanji. Then he stood, bowed deeply to the entire staff lined up by the kitchen doors, and walked out into the Manhattan night with Aisha at his side, not as employer and employee, but as two people who had remembered how to be human. 6 months later, the Wall Street Journal ran a profile, From Lucille to the World, How a Waitress and a Billionaire Redefined Kindness. Aisha's foundation, Tanaka Washington Bridges, had already funded 200 scholarships. Hiroshi's daughter Emi was learning Japanese from Aisha over Saturday brunches in Kyoto, calling her Aisha-ne. And every year on November 16, Lucille closed to the public. The staff received envelopes thick with cash, and the corner table, now permanently reserved, held a single dorayaki pancake, split open like a heart. Because some doors, once knocked on, stay open forever.